Hello everyone, coming to you again with a What I Would Have Done Thursday. Now, usually what I do for this segment and What I Would Have Done Thursdays is I discuss a film that has been critically either divided or critically given a review that is not as pleasant. And I find this film in particular to be very interesting because it's sort of returning to, or trying to turn to, the kind of alien world that we saw in the Alien franchise. Even though it's technically not claiming itself to be a prequel, I guess that's for the second movie apparently, because they are making a second Prometheus movie. After looking at it again and looking through it through an adult perspective, I kind of realized there are major problems I feel with Prometheus. I feel like that not everything feels consistent, or and I feel like a lot of the times there's just a lot of open-ended questions, and also it seems like that that the way the story sets itself up seems to be really clunky, and I feel like there's a lot of character problems too, and I just felt odd at the end after watching the film. I just felt like weirded out for some reason, and I have no idea why. And it was not just because I was seeing like an alien being reborn from something, but it was because the means that they have to establish the story, I thought it was just really odd for some reason. And when I looked at it again, I kind of understand why people are saying that this film has these really major problems. And I kind of wanted to look at it through my perspective and kind of give you an understanding of what I would have done differently, and that would, I think, make this movie a little bit stronger and maybe represent itself more as a sci-fi movie and return to sort of the sci-fi form that we haven't really seen in a while, because we've been so much bombarded with, I guess, superhero movies and maybe action movies and such, that, there's really, it seems like sci-fi's taken a seat, at least. I mean, I think we've seen films like Star Trek. I guess you could make the argument that sci-fi's still there, but it doesn't seem to be as to the forefront as a lot of other genres. It feels very subdued, at least in this age, for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm sure that it'll probably have a comeback, but it seems like you seem to get like one maybe decent sci-fi film a year now, it seems like. So I guess people can take that and moviegoers can take that for what it's worth. But basically, the first problem or issue that I kind of saw with Prometheus that I felt like needed some reworking, and I think this is a major important point, is the characters. A lot of the characters in Prometheus, I feel, are either very unlikable and or are just not of the caliber of intelligence you would feel for somebody to have when going on this kind of a mission, of a journey. Because they set the story up of Prometheus as, okay, there are these really good scientists who are experts in their field and understand what they're doing and what they're getting into, but they don't come off like they are these people. They don't come off as like that they're those characters because of their actions and how the way they sort of act. They don't resemble professional scientists. I can kind of see them as being like maybe part of a cult. Like, I think it would have been interesting had they set up the whole thing as like a cult experiment, where you have the two cult leaders who are the main person, like Shaw and and her husband, I forget his name, but because you see how those two characters are really at the forefront of this movie, and I can see them as sort of like establishing maybe like a cult, because they do kind of emphasize religion, and I felt like that would have been interesting had they taken it from that cult like perspective, and we would have characters that would probably be a bit more naive, a bit more willing to follow somebody, and it would be these two scientists who claim that they have the answers to what they're looking for. You know, I think that would have been really interesting. But instead, the problem is, I feel like that in a way Ridley Scott, the director, wanted us to take these characters seriously, and I personally don't take them seriously when they're on the screen, because they don't come off like real scientists. They don't come off as people that are very intelligent and would know how to navigate and understand the kind of mission that they're on. It seems like when they get out of the hypersleep that they've been in, it seems like they have really no clue what's going to happen and what's really going on. It's not until finally we get some exposition where we understand, oh, okay, this is the mission they're on and this is what they're trying to do, when we could have had this kind of established already on Earth, and it would have made a lot more sense, because that gives a context for the characters willing to go on this mission, rather than having it explained to them. Yeah, you're probably wondering why you've been asleep for 2 years, I think it was they were asleep for. Yeah, I think you probably want to know why you're going on this expedition millions of light years away on this planet that supposedly has aliens that supposedly created us. Also, so the characters don't match the kind of story that's trying to be set up. What's another issue that I had? And also the fact that they were unlikable and such, and that can all, I think, be changed, obviously, and that's what I definitely would have changed, because a lot of these characters come off as really unlikable. I would say Shaw is probably the only, I believe that's her name, played by, I believe her name's Naomi something, but she comes off as probably the only one that seems normal, and all the others just come off as really, just really jerky McJerks, or just really, or just really dumb. Also, I have to make note of this. Michael Fassbender, I think, is really the only character actually who has a little bit more dimension and is a little bit more interesting than the other characters. Does he do something that's kind of morally questionable within the story? Absolutely. But can you really hold it to him when he maybe doesn't know any better, or he's kind of curious like any other person, or maybe he's not really on the scientist's side or whatever? So it's really, and again, the problem too with Prometheus is it doesn't establish a lot of things, and I feel like it just doesn't answer a lot of important questions that should be answered. But again, that's probably why they are making a sequel, so they can explain stuff. But I feel like the whole setup is really weak from not only a character standpoint, but also from like a writing and plot setup standpoint. Okay, so Shaw, the main scientist lady, and her husband, they basically figure out that, oh, there's these different paintings and sort of, I guess, paintings and I want to say like stone carvings and just different representations of the same thing from different areas around the world that have the same kind of picture. And this picture it looks like a star system, or like a planetary system. I can't really remember exactly the context of that, but it was something to do with like, oh, they're arranged in this way, therefore that means we have to go there, because that's where we will find the aliens or whatever. And this is the only only evidence that they have for these scientists to go on their mission? Cave paintings. Like, cave paintings. Cave paintings, like, no, you can't just say, yeah, I have cave paintings. Woo, and look, they're all the same, and oh, that makes mean we must go there. Even if it's true, it doesn't even provide a context to the story. Even one of the dumber characters in the story is like, well, why, this is your only evidence? Like, even he was like, this is the only proof you have of us going on this really exhausting and tireless mission. Cave paintings. The hashtag cave paintings. You know, that's all you need to explain anything now in this entire world. Cave paintings. And literally the response that Shaw gives, and this is what I mean, I would say that she is kind of likable, but again, she kind of does have these little things that just make her stand out as just being, they just make her feel like, it just makes me feel like her intelligence is a little downgraded when she says, it's what I choose to believe. It's what I choose to believe. I choose to believe that these cave paintings ultimately mean that aliens created us and that we must go to this solar system or this area because they will ultimately provide us the answer, because I saw a bunch of cave paintings. I have no other scientific evidence. I have no physical data of an alien, you know, like I don't have an alien like right here in front of me, you know, to prove to you. And you know, I don't have the DNA sample, which they do get later on. They do get the proof that aliens were there. But the whole setup, I just felt it was just so weak. The setup just to go on this mission is not justifiable in any scientific means whatsoever. You don't base science on belief, you base science upon facts. If you ever say believe in the context of science, that's not a scientific word. That's just emotion. That's just how you feel. But it doesn't mean that you should apply those emotions in a scientific context, because science involves facts and evidence and proof. You can't just say, yeah, it's because I believe. I believe this is what we should do, even though I have really no evidence. Because that's really the only justification she gives. Only her and her husband, the only justification they can give for them to go on this planet is cave paintings. And to me, that's just such a weak plot point. That is such a weak setup that it kind of crushes a lot of the rest of the film, because you're looking at it going, really? These are okay, so we're supposed to be within the future, and these are the scientists that we have? You know, I think it just baffles me. I couldn't help but kind of just look at it and go, really? Like, no, you can't just base it off of that. So that's why I feel that there should have been a completely different setup, that this shouldn't have been intelligent scientists going off on a journey. I felt like that if they changed this to being some kind of a cult religion, and like Shaw was the head of it, and she was like, we are gonna go find the people who created us, you know, because I have the evidence, you know. If she was justifying her expedition through a religious perspective, then it would have made sense, because people believe in that religion. They believe in that God or gods or aliens, you know. They have a justification to go along with her because they believe in the same thing she does, and they follow these two people. If it was a cult mission, I could totally see this being a way more interesting and unique product, instead of being scientists or something. You know, we've seen that before, scientists going off and doing stuff and then things don't go on as planned. I mean, we've seen that before. Why not make it these people that were just uber duper religious and wanted to and were a part of this cult and wanted to go with these two cult leaders on this mission that they felt was really important, and this mission was to find their creators or whatever. So that would have made a lot more sense. And that's where I feel like the problems with Prometheus stem from the fact that it's trying to be scientific but also kind of taking it through a religious perspective. And the problem with that is that these two don't really mesh all that well together. You can mix religion with science. Like the Da Vinci Code I thought was okay. I mean, I obviously don't think it's perfect or anything, but I thought it was okay in trying to address religious and scientific concepts. But here the concepts don't connect, and they don't connect well. And I just feel like that she should have provided a lot more evidence than just, yeah, here's some cave paintings, here's some little planets, let's go. But we do later find out within the film that they really are the creators, and oh, she was right, those cave paintings happened to be right. But still, the means to get there I just thought was a little ridiculous and needed to be changed. Not only this, but the characters, although not only are they like unlikable and unfriendly and just not really the most approachable people, or at least people that I wouldn't really want to associate with, even Michael Fassbender can be a little bit intimidating at times. I don't know whether to feel like we should treat him as a good guy or a bad guy, but either way he's interesting, so that's that's beside the point though. The point is that a lot of these side characters and a lot of the main characters too do really ridiculously dumb things. For example, we have the two science idiots that somehow couldn't get out of the cave and were just like wandering about, and at first they said that they were gonna leave. They suddenly just changed their mind. They're like, yep, we're gonna leave. We're not gonna go on and explore this area. We're gonna leave. It's creeping me out. I'm gonna leave, because you'll realize that once they land on the planet, they have to go to this one cave, and then these two scientists are like, no, we don't want to do this. Let's go back. And they still end up being in the cave. And the funny thing is that they do have contact with the space with their ship. So obviously they can figure out a way out, because they have these balls that clearly map out the area for everybody. And these two people cannot figure out how to get out. And then they have this storm, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, we have to stay here for a while, huh? But that's not even really the dumbest part of these two characters. One gets high. Well, that's great. Yeah, great. A bunch of scientists getting stoned in a cave. Yeah, that's really what I want to watch. Well, one scientist gets stoned at least. He has like this thing in the spaceship, in the space suit or whatever. And then I just don't feel like that's the time or the place, especially when you're on your job. I mean, not while you're working, dude. And then there's the other scientist who literally goes up, okay, and they don't really give a justification for this, and he's not even stoned or anything. They go into this room that supposedly has these kinds of containers that are kind of lethal, because they've got the aliens swirling around in the goop and around the eggs and such. And then the alien literally comes out, and the guy, the scientist, the biologist, mind you, comes up to the alien and is like, isn't it beautiful? Like, isn't it beautiful? Don't you just want to touch it? And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, this thing is and this thing is hissing too. It's like a snake. It almost looks like a snake. It's like it opens itself up and it hisses at him like, get away from me, don't touch me, or I will hurt you. And he just keeps going, like just trying to, like, you know, play with it almost. I mean, he's just like looking at it and observing it, and just it's just so weird. And then the alien attacks, like when he tries to touch it, and I'm just thinking to myself, why? How are these scientists, like, how can these people be scientists? Like, it does not make any sense. Again, why the characters do not fit the title, like, at all. I could understand if there was some kind of hypnosis going on, and that the alien was somehow, like, messing with his mind. Like, I could see, but the movie doesn't explain that at all. It doesn't give a context as to, yeah, he's being hypnotized. Like, the alien doesn't give off any fumes. It doesn't have any eyes that it can stare at. It doesn't give off, like, a glow or anything. And you don't feel like he's really being hypnotized, because he's not really looking at it. He's just kind of, like, being just really dumb. There's no justification as to why he's reacting in this way. And I just don't understand, like, why they would do that. So again, if I were behind the helm of this movie, I would have made sure that my characters were a little bit more intelligent and a little bit more in depth, and would understand that when an alien goes like this and hisses at you and looks like a snake, you probably should run away from it. And yeah, you basically see that Prometheus tries to set up similar dumb characters to be killed off, and yeah, that's basically what they do with those two. But to be honest, I understand that we're not supposed to really like characters that end up dying in these kinds of films, but I would have liked it if they gave these characters more intelligence and more respect, so that we don't really treat them like dog chow when they die, or we don't feel like, hey, you know, I'm glad to see that guy go. You know, I mean, I feel like that there should be some kind of likability to some of these characters. I mean, just because you're making a movie to act some characters off doesn't mean that you can't make them interesting, or that they just don't, these characters just don't resemble what I think when I think of scientists. Because, like, do you think a biologist would ever go up to a creature that looks like it wants to strike him? I don't think so. And this character was supposed to be a biologist, and I'm thinking, this is just ridiculous. You just can't do that. So again, if these people were like cult followers, and they thought that this alien was maybe the person that created them, or maybe Shaw gives like some justification or something, like there's like maybe a book that they have, you know, and then in this book it says, you know, these aliens are like gods and demigods or something, or I don't know, just made some kind of explanation as to why this character would react in this way, I could buy into it. I would buy into it if he really thought deep down that this alien was somehow his friend. But there's no justification given in this story as to why he would react this way, especially when he is a scientist and he understands how animals work. Yeah, I just don't get it. And then and I guess the other guy's a geologist, and that's the guy who ends up getting high in the suit. And I'm just thinking to myself, really, really, why? No. He's Chow, basically, too. But, again, it's just, I just feel like it creates kind of this waste of time. With when it can actually be setting up things and giving you a context as to the story, it sort of just drifts off into dumb characters being axed off. I mean, I was kind of glad that I didn't have to deal with those two, because those two are probably the most annoying and unlikable out of the bunch. But not only were those two unlikable, but also Shaw's husband, I think, is not really the most mature adult. Like, this guy comes off like some, I don't know, just very full of himself leader. Like, he doesn't feel like somebody that I would want to follow or to really be around. He just is so he just comes off as just really his decisions just are so bafflingly dumb. There's this one point in the movie where he gets sick, and if you watch the film you'll understand how and why. Well, you probably won't understand really necessarily why, but it is established how he does get sick. And then how he gets sick is by this little and how he gets sick is basically he starts experiencing like symptoms of like there's something in his eye. I don't know what it is. I think it was like a worm or something. It was really weird. And again, this movie is really weird. But basically, he has this worm thing in his eye, and he really looks pale, and he does not look well. Doesn't tell anybody about it. Doesn't tell anybody at all. Just goes along like, yeah, nothing's wrong. And this is another point that I think should have been changed. I think they should have made him more of a leader, especially if he's going to be more of the forefront of the story. And to be honest, he's not a leader at all. And he doesn't even understand the importance of the mission. And he kind of just wants to go out there just because he's curious. And he doesn't take the assignment seriously. And treats it as sort of fun instead of actual like work, and you know, you're trying to, this is something really important, you know, you can't screw it up, you know. He doesn't really treat it that way, and I don't feel like that's how a leader should approach things, and obviously he doesn't approach it this way, and it's just frustrating. So definitely would have made characters a lot smarter or dumber depending on what they wanted to go for. And if I think they really went for the cult thing, that would have been a lot more interesting, and it would have made a lot more sense than making it that they're scientists and that they're high-tech and that they know a lot. But either way, Shaw's husband's character needed to really change, because he really doesn't seem to fit within the story, and if you want him to be a center focal point of the story, you should make him a leader. You should make him the one to stand out. However, there is an emphasis too that Shaw and her husband are sort of under the authority of Charlize Theron's character, and she just comes off as really like serious and just, I don't know, she just doesn't come off as really approachable either. Like, none of these characters are approachable. Like, no one is like somebody that I would really want to talk with at all. Like, and when you have that in a movie, I feel like that there's some kind of problem. But basically, she comes off as a really snooty, you know, I'm gonna take charge here and blah blah blah, but she really doesn't do much. I mean, she's really not in it for all that long, so she doesn't have a lot of context with her character. And it is kind of established that maybe she's a robot, maybe she's not, but in the end it doesn't matter, because spoilers, she gets killed, so we never know if she really was a robot or not. Or at least, and it doesn't really establish what really happens to her. We just know that she gets X'd off. And I'm not going to explain how, because I mean, I'm sure there's some people who haven't seen the film, but regardless, I just feel like that there were just a lot of problems with this movie that could have been solved had they changed the premise. And I feel like Shaw's husband's character needed to be more of a leader. He needed to be more of a role model, and he wasn't in this movie at all. He came off as a really, useless and not contributing much to the story at all, if at all. So I guess I do have kind of a problem with this movie, a couple of problems with this movie. And I think if had they changed the premise to the idea of that they're going because of a cult mission, it would have made, I think, a lot more sense. And had they changed some things within the plot and given the characters a little bit more depth and likability, then you could have gotten a much more solid product. Visually, though, the movie is stunning. It's just that the things within the plot and the characters are really the main issues with this movie. And I feel it just stems around from this idea that they think that they're scientists on a mission to discover really truth, but they don't really act like scientists. They don't they don't take the mission as seriously as scientists would. They just don't resemble scientists at all in this movie. So it definitely would have made sense if it more sense if it was like a cult mission or something like that. And if they made the characters, again, just more likable and more humanistic and more interesting. I feel like a lot of the characters just come off as really, they just don't come off as intelligent and as smart. And I'm not saying that you can't make people that are within a cult not intelligent at all. I mean, I'm sure you can. And that's not a problem, but I feel like there needs to be a justification for the way characters act, and reacting to this by touching it and being a or being a biologist and having it hiss at you, this is the snake thing, alien thing, and this is your hand. This is what's gonna happen to your hand. It's gonna out. It's not gonna hit a bookcase. It's gonna be gone. Like they're gonna get your hand, your arm, everything maybe. But yeah, I just feel like that their reactions don't make sense. There needs to be a context, especially when you're making a sci-fi movie. There needs to be some kind of explanation for things. And I feel like this movie was just really all over the place. Really did not make sense to me at times because of just the way the characters reacted, and also because the characters really weren't all that likable or all that interesting or all that engaging, and I just feel like that was really the major problem. And to be honest, the only way I can see really this movie kind of working after looking at it is if they just made the mission based upon on a cult following. If they made it where there were these people who were part of a cult, and that cult decided to go on this mission to outer space to go find their creators, and they end up realizing that their creators are not who they thought that they were, and that would be a lot more interesting. That would have made the characters' reactions make a lot more sense and give a lot more context to the story. But instead you make this setup of, they're scientists, they have all this equipment, they have all these resources, and they're going to fulfill something that is scientifically provable. But the evidence that they give is just so loosely based. So I can only see this story working had they made more context and had made more proof that allowed it to be justifiable that this is why we're going where we're going. Or if they made it a cult mission. And also with the characters, I would make them, again, more likable, more interesting. So really, all the main problems I feel with Prometheus were the plot and then the characters. If you just scrap these two, you're taking away a lot of what makes a film. And it's sad. I thought that just the way that they executed things was just really poor. At least the mission was if you really watch the film, you'll probably realize how poorly they tried to execute this mission, and how the characters don't don't react in a rational way when they should, and they end up creating more problems, and it just creates one big mess. And I feel like the plot was a mess and the characters were a mess. And if you have those two as your big messes, it's a really big problem. And I really understand why people don't really praise this film a whole lot, at least from what I've been hearing. And I mean, you can watch Spoonie's talk where he was originally from That Guy with the Glasses. He's not anymore, but Spoonie talks about this, and he goes on for he and I think it's his brother. They go on for an hour and a half talking about how this movie's so messed up. But I think if they would have gone for that cult following idea, had they made it a cult mission, then a lot of this stuff would make more sense to me, and I could maybe, and if they could justify certain things more and make everything seem more realistic, but also, you know, put it in a fantasy setting, then it would really work, because that's kind of what sci-fi is supposed to do. It's supposed to make it's supposed to have like rationality mixed in within like a fantasy fictional world. You know, that's what sci-fi really is supposed to do, and I feel like a lot of people were disappointed because it didn't really capture those two well. It didn't seem to really fit together all that well, and I really understand why, and a lot of that has to do with the plot, and a lot of that has to do with the characters. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about what I would have done with Prometheus. Again, either had the plot as being a cult mission, or it being a scientific mission that had a lot of evidence and a lot of grounds as to why to go on it, and then they had characters that sort of fitted with that mold. And in this movie, they don't. So that's what I would have done plot-wise, either or. And as far as characters, that's the main crux of this story. That's really what I find bothersome, is just the fact that these characters, they don't come off as likable, they don't come off as interesting, they just come off as really just very unapproachable and not as interesting, and I don't feel like I'm rooting really for anybody in the end. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about Prometheus, and what I would have done, and I just feel like the movie was such a mess, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around it. But I think that's ultimately all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them. But until the next video,